Hello, welcome to the latest edition of From the Horse's Mouth podcast. I'm your host, Phil Fersht, and today I'm very excited to be joined by the one and only Julie Sweet, who's the CEO of Accenture. Hi, Julie, how are you doing?
Hi, Phil. Thanks for having me today.
Well, I mean, we haven't caught up in a while, but it's great to see you looking well. And what's it like running a company of over 800,000 people? Just, can you give us a little glimpse into what you do on a day-to-day basis?
Sure. Well, I have to tell you, and I know we're going to jump into AI at some point, but a big
Yeah.
part of what I do every day is work on AI. So, one of the things that people talk to me a lot about is, how do you keep up and thinking about all the different developments. And for me and my entire leadership team, AI, learning about AI, thinking about how it works for clients is a part of the daily job. And then, second part of the daily job is clients, right? So, one of the things I think people find sometimes surprising, I mean, I spend approximately 50% of my time working with clients. And I don't mean just meeting a bunch of new clients, but really sponsoring programs myself, diving deep with clients when we're doing new things. And then the third element is, of course, around our people and thinking about, how, especially right now, we're continuing to rotate our people. But those are three. I mean, I've got all the other stuff you have to do as a public company, but those are kind of the three ways I think about my day.
So, how much has changed in the last 2 years in the industry? I mean, you're very connected to CEOs right across the Fortune 100, etc. How much is changing for them, do you feel?
I'd say that the thing that's changing the most for CEOs to begin with is actually the macro. And so while AI is this incredible new powerful tool that every CEO is spending a lot of time on to figure out, can it be the solution? They believe, in its power. What's changed in the last couple of years, though, is kind of the increased and ongoing volatility, of the macro. And when you kind of dig under economic growth, for example, you know, if you take the US, a lot of the GDP growth here is tied to the tech companies, right?
Yeah.
Underneath that, growth is not so attractive and companies are really struggling. And so managing the macro is really the huge thing because in the last 2 years, it has become more uncertain, more volatile. And then you add to that, that at the same time, there's this incredibly powerful new tool that leaders 5 years ago didn't have. And so thinking about at the same time, is there some way to address and be more successful by harnessing it requires a very different level of energy and understanding at the CEO and the C-suite level because this is not plumbing. The AI's real value is in the core of the business, and you're not touching your core with the new technology unless you deeply understand it. There's a lot of challenges today. It's super exciting. I wouldn't trade this moment, and I talk to CEOs all the time. None of us would trade this moment. It is a incredibly exciting time. You feel a huge sense of responsibility and an opportunity to make an impact. But it's definitely not the same as it was even just a few years ago for CEOs.
Wow. So, how's this changed the world of Accenture? What challenges have you encountered and how are you dealing with that?
Well, first, maybe before we start with the challenge, I'm really proud of, and it's also like a representative, like just how fast we're changing. I mean, Phil, you know as well. Let's go back to November 2022 when ChatGPT emerged. We had 30 people working on Gen AI, right? We had 40,000 data and AI professionals. In a really short amount of time, you're looking at Accenture where we have 80,000 AI and data professionals, right? We've done 11,000 projects, right? We were at a handful just, 3 years ago, not even 3 years ago. So it's tremendous to see how a company, we've always embraced change. When I interviewed at Accenture in 2009, that's what the CEO said to me. The company you're joining is not going to be the same company in 3 years. But even in that history, the way we have built this business is enormous. Now, what are the challenges? The challenges are that our clients actually have an opportunity to use this powerful new tool in every part of their business. And they're looking to us to rapidly figure that out for them, right? To come in with that point of view. And so keeping up with the pace of the demand, is something where we have to educate people faster, right? We luckily have all of the ecosystem partnerships that help us understand and get ahead. But the demand for reinvention from our clients is enormous. And that's where we spend a lot of time on how do we invest and how do we move our own people to be there faster, because that's what our clients want.
Yeah. I mean, people talk reinvention, and I know you guys, you talk about it a lot. But do you think clients are truly ready to reinvent themselves, or they know they have to and they're just struggling to figure out where to even start?
Phil, I would look at it from two perspectives. From an industry perspective, in every industry, there are clients who are ready and who are executing. And mostly that's because in every industry, and I mean every industry, even like sort of industries that would typically lag, like a chemicals industry, right? And that's because over the last decade, in every industry, you have leaders who've invested in their technology and their data, because as a threshold matter, before you even get to leadership and mindset, if you don't have the right data foundation, if you're not mostly in the cloud, if you haven't really changed your architecture over the last decade, it's very hard to scale, right? So every proof of concept can work because you force data into it, right? Actually taking it across the company is a big challenge. The second bigger challenge, though, is having more than the CEO, like actually having the CEO and the C-suite really committed to actually changing. We talk about changing the way you work, changing your workforce, and changing your workbench, like how you use AI. And one of the biggest challenges is the CEO may be ready, but what a company has to do is to commit and put the outcomes in their P&L and create plans around that. Like when Accenture did a few years ago, we said we weren't using all of our own services, and we wanted to get to a minimum of $1.5 billion in savings in our back office. That was built into the plan that was underneath the guidance I gave, right? There was these were the KPIs that I measure the company with. And what we're often seeing is that, like in particular, AI and reinvention tend to be projects that we're not signing up for in the P&L, right? And until that happens, it's very difficult to scale.
So what does it take, in your opinion, to drive commitment and accountability for AI adoption? You talk about business plans and performance objectives and feedback loops, but what do you think it really takes to drive this commitment from the client side?
Well, the first thing it takes is leader-led learning, right? Because, actually lots of people coming in from the workforce and entry-level jobs are already AI, native, right? But for leaders, you have to understand the technology, and the technology is not what we're all using every day to, have better search, right? It is actually, what does this technology do? What are its limits? Where is the technology? And that requires an in-depth understanding that is not like the old, digital of yesteryear, where you could go on a digital safari to, Silicon Valley, and you knew enough to say, okay, let's go, move to the cloud, right? And so one of the things we did is we started a business unit called reinvent around training. But we're doing a lot of work with leadership teams around actually the in-depth learning, because it's not one session, right? Because until you understand the actual power of the technology, it's hard to commit. And it's hard to understand why, Accenture comes in, and we're saying, here's your process today. Here's what the process needs to look like with advanced AI. And it's not just advanced AI, because that's sort of another question, but all of these solutions are using all sorts of AI, right? Because advanced AI isn't accurate enough in all parts of a process. But regardless, it's if we come in and say, here is what you do today, here's how you radically need to change it, that's hard to commit to with all the people, the change management. We've done things, especially in the core of the business, for decades. unless you truly understand the power of the technology.
So how's that changed Accenture yourselves as a business? Have you had to dig deep into the skill sets within your own organization, the way that you look at your own process? Have you been through a reinvention that you feel you can go to clients with?
Yes. Well, first, I'd sort of back up for a moment and think about so we always like to be our own best credential. And so when we approach AI, we approach it for ourselves the way that we approach it for our clients. And so, because an AI strategy is not the strategy of the company, there's a business strategy of the company, right? So for Accenture, when, if you go back to when ChatGPT first happened, right, we had a single leader, our chief strategy officer, who was our former chief technology officer, we set an initial strategy where we basically said there are three kinds of ways we're going to use AI. There's what we do for clients, there's how we deliver for clients, and then there's how we operate Accenture. And we have to prioritize where we would do the investments based on our business strategy. And our business strategy was very clear. We had to take an early leadership in AI. And so that meant initially a lot of investment in creating the solutions for our clients, right? So that's why we've had extraordinary sales, $5 billion in revenue, right? Because we said, first things first, before we start doing it at Accenture, in terms of how we operate, the third category, our business strategy said, put the resources there. We also were undergoing in our own back office at the time, we were actually undergoing the cleaning up siloed processes, using our own services, using all the technology platform we had. And we said, we're not going to start, for example, when agents came, using agents on a process where we already thought we had too many people or too many steps, et cetera. This is real life, right? We often are going to clients and saying, you should use this as a catalyst to figure out all the cleanup that you need to do that gives you immediate savings before you start to use kind of the new technology. So we are absolutely, at this point on the third category in operating, using it to, reimagine order to cash, right? We already started in marketing. We use all our own services. So we're doing a ton of it, in our SynOps platform that we use for our operations business. But I share that story because the answer for our clients is they do need to prioritize. And they need to make sure a lot of, just like us, you have to pay for this along the way. And there's so much value. And I can give you very specific examples of where, we're delivering value using advanced AI, but that a big part of the value starts with cleaning up the processes.
It's like companies having to address things they've neglected for years are now forced to. Now, how is this impacting the services industry? I think we saw IBM's stock go down 13% because of a COBOL announcement from Anthropic this week. But how is this adversely or proactively impacting services from your experience, Julie?
I think if you look at the market, there's a lot of factors going on in the market, including a lot of misunderstanding. IBM's a great example. We've been using Claude's, the prior model to refactor COBOL into Java already, right? So the new one is even better at that. It's actually only about 25% of the effort of moving from the mainframe to the cloud, for example, because actually the hard part is all the architecture, et cetera. When we look at mainframe, there's a massive opportunity right now. With IBM's new Z17 server, it allows you to now modernize in the mainframe. And our view has always been it's going to be a hybrid. There are certain workloads that should be in the cloud, like things like consumer facing, so like in a retail bank, because you are constantly changing, or things that require a lot of compute, like risk modeling. But, things that require 100% uptime that are super intense, low latency, like checking and processing, interest rate changes, et cetera, every day. Like these are the kinds of things that you need it. And they belong in the mainframe. The challenge was the lack of agility before and the ability to use AI, right? So we see things like being able to do the coding better just makes it now less expensive to do the mainframe modernization and the move to the cloud that makes sense. So we see that as a huge opportunity because banks haven't and insurance companies haven't moved that far because it has been expensive, right? The technology hasn't been there. That's a great example of an announcement that went out that sort of isn't fully understood as to, what are the implications for that. There's so much opportunity right now to take the new technologies and other technology advancements and to do what I call, to make the impossible possible, right? And you want those kinds of investments, and that creates for the services companies as well as for the technology companies new opportunities. That's a very hard, that's not being necessarily heard by the markets, but that's what we're executing, day in and day out. At the same time, of course, these also opens up, challenges like in every technology. I mean, you remember with RPA, right? We used RPA. It eliminated thousands upon thousands of jobs in the services industry. And what did we do? We went after growth, right? We used that opportunity and more than offset it by what does RPA then allow companies to do and how can we help those companies do that? And what are the new areas that you need to go through? And I've been saying this for, at least 2.5 years because everyone over tilted on productivity with AI. You do not cut your way to growth. AI will benefit all when AI is the engine for growth and productivity.
Couldn't put it better. You can't cut your way to growth. I think that's fantastic. So do you think the way services are set up today when you look across the industry, you look at your competitors and some of your partners, do you think our industry gets it? Do you think we're set up to drive companies along this path? Or do you think we're staring at a lot of interesting failures as we look at the next couple of years?
I think our industry is like every other industry. It has to reinvent itself. And I'm making a bet on our entire industry. I mean, Accenture, I believe we're the best position and we're leading, but I bet on our whole industry. As an industry, we have reinvented ourselves, when you went from on-prem to SaaS, when you went to digital, and, you have serious leaders who understand that there's a big reinvention ahead. At Accenture, right, we are leading the way because we are creating the solutions for our clients. We are also changing the way we deliver. And we are trying to work with clients to also change things like commercial models, which I know is near and dear to your heart, right? Because we believe that the future should be much more about outcome-based models. The biggest constraint there is not actually the services industry. It is clients wanting to move to outcome-based models. As you know, it's easy to say. Actually executing on that with procurement officers, is not so easy. But we're committed as an industry to evolving our commercial models to meet the moment. And our clients need that as well. They don't want to take the risk around technology, right? Like when we bring a platform, like what we do in our IT or in our operations business, right? We're taking the technology risk. We're making the investments, right? And our clients want to continue to have to do this. They don't have the expertise. They don't want to have to build things that they don't need to. They want to spend their money on things that are going to make them really different in the market. So right. I believe our industry is committed to reinvention. We are all reinventing. And, there's one certainty, only one certainty in this whole AI. AI will not be successful unless adopted. And that is what our industry helps clients do.
So are you seeing certain industries moving faster than others and taking the lead, maybe because of competitive pressures or that sort of thing?
I go back to kind of what I said earlier, which is this time around, unlike with digital, there isn't certain industries that are majorly lagging, because in every industry there is somebody who's pushing ahead. And the reason I emphasize that, Phil, is that sometimes I get these questions like, US versus Europe, or which of the industries. And for every CEO, the only thing that matters is there someone in their industry that's going to get there first? And when we were doing digital, and you'll remember this, there were whole industries. Energy was massively behind in cloud, right? Like, and everyone could be complacent because of that, right? Insurance lagged banking. Like, we all remember that, right? It is different. If you're a CEO in an industry today, you have to know that in your industry, there are players who are pushing ahead, and you cannot be complacent that the whole industry is just going to be, later. So that's one point. Now, where do you see industries doing more and where we're doing more? It is completely tied to two things. What was their tech stack to begin with, right? So banks, for example, have done a lot of investment in technology. So they're kind of more ready. And then second, what is the usefulness of the technology today? So today, Gen AI and agents are best in things like customer service, marketing, summarization, helping banks upsell because you put data in their hands, right? And so you're seeing industries where they have that need going faster because the technology is ready. Right. So today, the technology, if you're going to stick it in the grid or stick it in, asset management, right, it has more limitations just based on where the technology is today, the security and all of the things around it. And I think that's an important thing to understand is that you have to look at both the technology stack, like what's starting with it. If you don't have data, for example, hard to scale, but also where is the technology itself in terms of where is it ready to be deployed at scale? And that's why you have like consumer banking, you've got consumer goods and retail able to push ahead in certain areas faster that if you're a manufacturer, you're not doing because you don't have the same needs.
We talked about the shift to outcomes, and you can't cut yourself, to growth with AI. Are you generally seeing clients realize that they have to change how they procure services, to how they engage with companies like you? Or do you feel that's moving very, very slowly at this point? I mean, the actual mindset of clients realizing we can't just do things the same old way.
Many of our clients do recognize that, and we have some forward-thinking clients. I would say that as a whole, it's moving slower than I think we would like as an industry. And so we're very focused on working with clients and getting input from clients on how to do this. So our clients are saying, look, we need a win. They understand we need a win-win for them and for us, right? And so we're focused on working with the ones that are ready and hoping that will then create momentum later.
I love that. Everyone needs a win-win, right? And, let's fix up a bit. You were at the Davos conference recently, and, it's a great opportunity to just talk with politicians as well as other CEOs. Did you come away thinking differently about this pace of change and what clients need to do?
Well, one of the messages I left Davos with, I was asked to speak at a dinner on the final night, and I predicted that this would be the last Davos where AI was the topic. And what I meant by that is that we think that, next year it's going to be less about AI generally and more about what industries have been changed because of AI. So let's take, for example, agentic commerce. LLMs, so the models, are going to become the next mall, right? This is a brand new channel that didn't exist before. We expect there to be a ton of progress over the next 12 months. We're deep in this. And so next year at Davos, it won't be about, hey, this is coming. It'll be about how is this changing the industries that go direct to consumers, right? We really are at that point where there are enough real use cases and things that can be material that we think, based on the work we're doing with clients right now, that 12 months from now, the conversation will start to really shift to how industries are being changed, not could be changed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're talking about 2022 and ChatGPT, and it's only 2026, and the change has been significant already, right? Now, obviously, we have elections coming up this year in the US. I think AI is becoming a little dirty word in certain quarters when I talk to people. Do you think there's going to be more political backlash happening? Do you think there's going to be other issues that we're going to have to contend with as an industry as we move faster and faster into this?
I sort of take a step back and think about it less around, is there political backlash or this or that, and more around, what do we actually need to do as companies and countries in order to ensure that this powerful technology really benefits all? And I think there's three things we have to do. The first is we do need to use AI as an engine for growth, because if you don't, then you just have, significant unemployment without options, right? And part of that needs to be focusing on small and medium-sized businesses. Around 50% of the global GDP comes from small and medium-sized businesses. And that's going to it'll be a big opportunity. Some of our clients are going after helping them. It's also something we need to do public-private partnerships. Like, for example, we're working with a university system here in the US where we're funding internships at small and medium-sized businesses to help them get access to the right talent and to help new graduates also ultimately get jobs. So, AI is an engine for growth. The second piece is we do need to reinvent how we learn. And, formal education is no longer a destination. It's a stop along a lifelong learning journey. And that is going to be a change for the private sector. It's a change for the government, because the government cannot expect, again, small and medium-sized enterprises to be able to fund that change, right, of ongoing skilling. And so there's going to need to be new ways of doing that. And it's a big change for individuals, right, because they have to embrace that they may be 45 years old and they're going to have to learn a new way of doing things. And then finally, and this is I'm super passionate about, we have to commit to being intentional about preserving entry-level jobs. We are doing that at Accenture. We are hiring more entry-level jobs in all of our major markets this year than we did last year. But to do that, we've reconstructed those jobs. We're doing different kinds of skilling when people come on board. We're hiring for different skills. And, the economics don't work if you eliminate entry-level jobs. The building, future talent doesn't work if you eliminate entry-level jobs. But this has to be entirely focused and intentional. Otherwise, right, you can get unintended consequences of using this technology. So that's what I'm focused on. And I think when you focus on those three things, what you get is it addresses if there's going to be a backlash, if there's misunderstanding, what's actually happening in the communities. And as an industry and industries, we all have to do this together. This isn't about tech. It's not about services. It's not about any individual. We have to work together to find those solutions industry by industry. And we're spending a lot of time on that, both in paid work, but also in the work we're doing to invest in how to think about this.
I get more questions from my clients asking me for advice for their kids now than ever. She said, what should they study? They're worried about what their kids are going to do when they finish college, et cetera. It's, and a lot of it is driven by this fear of what AI is doing to society. And you're right, the career progression of where we all go. But it's fascinating to hear what you guys are doing, particularly in the mid-market. That was really enlightening. This has been wonderful hearing from you, Julie, and getting a real flavor for where Accenture is and the way you're thinking about the market and the way where things are going. And I really look forward to sharing this interview with the industry.
Well, thanks, Phil. And as always, we appreciate you being a voice for the industry and bringing voices from the industry to all of our clients. So thanks for having me today. And I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, me too. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to From the Horse's Mouth, Intrepid Conversations with Phil Fersht. Remember to follow Phil on LinkedIn and subscribe and like on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favourite platform for no-nonsense takes on the intricate dance between technology, business, and ideological systems. Got something to add to the discussion? Let's have it. Drop us a line at fromthehorsesmouth@hfsresearch.com or connect with Phil on LinkedIn.